It's overwhelming out there because really I help people figure out one thing, and it's, should I own a business? And then should that business be a startup or a franchise? And because a franchise is not a good fit for everyone. It's for the person that wants the systems in place, that the guide, the blueprint to get them up and running much quicker.
This is Dana Samuelson with the American Gold Exchange. You're listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast with Mike Cavagioni.
Welcome to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. Are you trying to get out of debt, invest, or just not sure where to start? Then this is the place for you. We discuss different ways to get out of the rat race and build your wealth. Join us on this wild ride to financial freedom.
Hey, welcome back to the Average Joe Finances Podcast. I'm your host, Mike Cavagioni, and today we have a fellow Paisan on, Giuseppe Grammatico. So Giuseppe, thank you so much for taking the time today and joining me on the podcast.
Mike, looking forward to it. Yeah, it's a small world, right? I feel like we're from the same area here on the East Coast. So that's awesome.
Yep, absolutely. Before we hit record, we were talking about that, right? Just the Jersey Shore in general. I used to go vacation up there. So just really good time. So really awesome to have you on. I'd like to start these things off the way I start every podcast, and that is we want to know more about you. So if you could share a little bit about yourself, share your story, tell us, who is Giuseppe Grammatico?
So yeah, Giuseppe Grammatico, that's a mouthful. It's Italian for Joseph. A lot of people don't know that. Born and raised in New Jersey, married to a beautiful wife, Anita, and two children, two teenagers in the house now officially here in New Jersey. Avid soccer fan, pizza fanatic. That's a little bit about me. But started my career, family came over. I'm first generation, started in the restaurant business, and then said, you know what, I want to go to college. I loved investments, personal finance, became one of the youngest Series 7 licensed brokers. Worked for Payne Weber at the time, now UBS, and went down that route, was a financial advisor, an investment wholesaler, and just didn't feel like I learned a ton, but didn't feel like it was the right fit for me. Ended up going back to grad school, did the corporate thing for a while, and said, you know what, I have a passion for business, working in the restaurant as a kid and growing up into my 20s. But I don't like that specific industry due to the hours. What else is out there? So I stumbled across franchising, started working with a franchise coach, and bought my first two franchises back in 2007. And shortly after, I said, you know what, this helping people own a business, one of the largest investments they'll make. It was really enjoyable, the process. So I became a franchise coach and consultant shortly after. So it's been a fun ride. I jokingly say I help people avoid I should say divorces if for married couples, because I like to include everyone and make sure they're on the same page, but really love what I do and enjoy helping people throughout the entire process.
Awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate that response, and a lot to unpack there, right? Because you said when your family first came to the States, they started off in the food industry business, right? In the restaurant. It's funny because like when my grandparents came here, they had a deli in our hometown where we lived at Central Islip, and they had this deli, and the house was like attached to it. Mm-hmm. And that was just how we grew up. And later on, we all moved on to their own things. My dad had his own business, right? My uncles got into like real estate and everything. And funny thing I want to point out too, since you had mentioned the translation of Giuseppe from Italian to English is Joseph. Right. That's actually my middle name is Joseph, but the actual Joseph, not Giuseppe. Okay. And that's funny because when you're coming on this show, this is called Average Joe Finances. So it's a perfect name to come on the show.
I was the Average Joe. That's it. Yeah, I still am the Average Joe.
The Average Giuseppe.
Average Giuseppe for the Italian crowd.
There you go. Yeah, so it's interesting to see a similar dynamic in just the way it was for our families when they came to the States, right? Starting off on their own, trying to live that American dream, start their own business. And then you went to school, like you did your own path, and then decided, hey, I want to get into business. This is what I want to do. But then you got into franchising, right? So getting into franchising and experiencing that and seeing how helpful it was, right? You want to be able to help other people do that. So I think that's really awesome. I had someone on not too long ago, and this is what we were talking about. We were talking about franchising. Right. As a matter of fact, these episodes might be very close to being back to back, which is good, I think, too. It'll be like a little series. But what I find really interesting about the franchising industry is if you get into the right one, it's essentially like a business in a box that's handed to you.
Right.
And a lot of the stuff that you have to go through at the very beginning of starting a business to what you get with the franchise right away puts you like 2 to 3 years ahead of starting it on your own. And like most businesses will take, it averages about 5 years before you see if you're going to make profit or not. And what I've noticed, I have friends that have some franchises.
Right.
And what I've noticed within the first year or two, they made their money back and they're profitable. And I'm like, okay, this is really neat. So it's actually something I've been looking at for a little while. So I think it's awesome that now I'm having a couple franchise folks come on the show and I get to talk to you guys about this. But anyway, so if you could just talk to me a little bit about what it is that you actually do as a franchise coach or consultant. Like, how are you helping people get started in the business?
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's overwhelming out there because really I help people figure out one thing, and it's, should I own a business? And then should that business be a startup or a franchise? And because a franchise is not a good fit for everyone. It's for the person that wants the systems in place, that the guide, the blueprint to get them up and running much quicker. So What I help people with is lots of education, figuring out, talking about the differences, not the pros and cons, but the differences between a franchise and a startup. We talk about the types of ownership, full-time ownership, semi-absentee ownership, where you can keep your job and have a business on the side, and then semi-passive, which is a new category where you're investing much less time in the business. And for that benefit, there's an added fee you pay, almost like a management company, similar to a hotel concept. It's an overwhelming process. And what we're seeing is people are, just like myself, by the way, I'm guilty of this. They're researching in reverse. They're looking for the hot franchise and then trying to make it work for them. So this is great. This franchise is opening up all over the place across the country. I should own one. Yeah, they're open 7 days a week. Yeah, it's very low ticket, low margin, but they're opening up all over. And you start to settle to the point where it's nowhere near the business you were looking at. My role as a franchise coach and consultant is to say, let me level the playing field. Let me educate everyone, whether you have money, you don't have money, you're in the accumulation phase. Let's talk about what a franchise is, and that's a proven system. You do get that unfair advantage, like you said. What's your time worth? So the franchisor has already figured out the best way of doing business. So yes, you may pay a $20,000, $30,000, $50,000 franchise fee, but what would that have cost just in hours, blood, sweat, equity? Figuring the systems out may take you 2 years to figure out the system. So we really boil it down to, what does the ideal business look like? So it's called reverse engineering it. I did a show on this about just about any decision you make. Figure out what your ideal day is. What are you doing daily? What's your skill set? Combine the skill set in an average day. So if you love sales and you love going on appointments and working with the potential clients, that could be your role in the business. Where are you located? Are you in Hawaii? Are you in Long Island? Are you in New Jersey? Is it a physical location, or are you working from home? Are there lots of employees or less? Are they contractors? Are they W-2? And the list goes on. And we really figure out, without naming the industry or looking at the specific franchise, the ideal business. And once you get clear on getting rid of all the distraction, figuring out ideally what you would enjoy the most, because sustainability is key, not making money your first year, but making money for long periods of time. Once we look at that, then we go back to the franchise companies to see if there's areas available, territory availability, we call it. Is the investment in line? Do the financials meet the requirements? Are there any resales? Because we also work at resale. So we go back and have a conversation with the franchise company as well. So really figuring out the ideal fit. And once you do it that way, you can rule out 99% of the companies, because in many cases, the financials aren't there. The territory sold. They want more of an extrovert person versus an introvert, and vice versa. So we do all that in the back end to really help you and guide you throughout the way, figuring out funding, figuring out, do you need a franchise attorney, and that kind of thing.
Right on. Yeah. Okay. Already right off the bat, some great info there, Giuseppe. Now, with what you were talking about, some of the things that I'm picking out here is, if somebody's considering opening up a franchise, they want to start a business and they want to do a franchise, they want to be a franchisee, how would that person go about finding the right franchise that's the right fit for them?
How would they go about finding?
Yeah. Like, how do you know what's the right franchise for you?
And it's simply figuring out, first off, if a franchise is a good fit, if you do want that blueprint, going down that list to say, okay, how do I want this business to essentially be structured? So the problem and the roadblock people hit is, I think it needs to be brick and mortar. I think I need to have a physical location because I feel like that's going to make me more money. And I'm going to just squash this argument once and for all. There's no correlation whatsoever between a brick and mortar franchise or a franchise that's a larger investment to your returns. There's no correlation, because you buy the more expensive franchise and you hate that business, you hate the number of employees, you hate everything about it. It's going to come through in the way you manage and the way you expand the business. And that business is ultimately going to suffer. Your employees are going to feel it and that kind of thing. So really, it's about figuring out what works for you. If you prefer, all things aside, to work from home and not have that location, there you go. That alone is going to rule out a huge percentage of the franchise. So I'll give you two examples. That alone, working from home, and a business that allows you to keep your job and have a side business, a side hustle, where you can keep the job and then also run the business via certain support systems, such as turnkey marketing and an inbound call center that will handle all your lead flow. Those two just areas alone can rule out, I would say, 80+% of the franchises out there. You want to go with the companies that are really strong and that can support you and having a job. They may have to help you find a general manager. So once you start, it's like a funnel, you start adding different requirements and it starts narrowing down the search. And once we have the ideal 5, 6, 7 characteristics of that business, then we go back and say, okay, I have a short list of 10 companies that match that criteria. Let's see what's available, because you may not meet the financial requirements. It may not be available in your market. So we start to scale it down. And ultimately, the goal is really to get it down to 2 or 3 companies that you can spend a lot of time continuing the due diligence process.
Okay, right on. Yeah. So a great way of really whittling it down to what's going to be the right fit for that individual. And it's good to know that if you decide to do a franchise that works from home, it's going to already knock out 80%. So that's going to be a huge number gone, and it's going to help you like really narrow it down. So that's awesome. Now, speaking of funding, right? Because you had mentioned that somebody might not have the right, or they might not be financially fit for a certain franchise. What if they are, but they don't have the funds to start it up? Like, how would somebody go about funding a franchise?
That's so lots of potential options depending on your circumstances. We look at financial requirements. We typically look at liquidity and net worth, and those are requirements that the franchisor will list and just say, hey, anyone you bring to us, we want to make sure that they're hitting these requirements, because from a liquidity standpoint, you need to be able to open up the franchise, have 3 months, at least 3 to 6 months of working capital, be able to pay your employees, marketing, your rent, if it's a brick and mortar location. So we want to make sure that there's coverage there, because it may take you a little bit longer to get open, or you hit some roadblocks. Ultimately, my recommendation is to contact a funding partner that knows a lot about franchises. We work with a company by the name of Fran Fund, and what they'll do is they'll do a full free analysis, and what they'll come back with is all your options, the options that they offer, the services that they offer, as well as services they don't offer. So to give an example that you are able to utilize if you qualify a retirement rollover, it's called a retirement rollover for business startup, and you can use your retirement assets to fund it as long as that's coming from a previous employer. So if you're working with your current employer and their plan, that you would not be able to use those funds, but you can use a previous employer. And if you decide to leave your jobs, that is one way of funding a business. The most popular has been the SBA loans, where you put a percentage down and fund the rest. That's a government-backed loan. But then you get creative and look at other ways. So those are services, or I should say products, that they offer. But then they go outside the box and say, okay, we noticed that you have a ton of equity in your home. You can get a home equity line of credit. Very simple and straightforward. And you would go right to your mortgage lender. Or we can move away from the home and go right to our investments, our non-retirement investments. If you have an investable, a taxable regular investment portfolio, you could take a loan on your money. So if you have securities, mutual funds, stocks, and things like that, individual holdings, you can take a loan on your own money without selling the underlying securities. Another way, traditional loans, family loans, partnerships, we go into more detail. But I think the SBA loan, home equity lines of credit, and the retirement rollover has been the most popular. Long story short, if I summarize, there are numerous options. And in the event you're financially not there, Fran Fund, as well as myself, we take a step back and say, okay, these are the numbers you want to aim for. Maybe your net worth is there, but your liquidity is a little bit light. Let's start maybe saving and talking in 6 months. You're at 25. Let's get you to, I'm making this number up, 50,000 in liquidity. Let's maybe talk in 6 months and see if you're at that level. So they don't just say, hey, we can't work with you. They'll put together a plan to work with you and set you up to get to those numbers.
Yeah, no, that's good to know. And that there's so many options that somebody can use to fund their franchise. I think what's really interesting is that the fact that you can use this retirement rollover. So if you have been working for a while and you've been contributing to a 401k and IRA and things like that, and you're no longer with that employer, and the fact that you could take that and roll it into a franchise is absolutely amazing. Because if you think about the return you're going to get with starting that business, starting the franchise, as long as you're doing the right one for you and you're going to put the time and effort into it, the return you would get with that will far exceed what you would get leaving it in the 401k. The fact that you can actually really boost what your retirement account will look like, or boost the money that you're going to get out of it by starting your own business, is pretty awesome. The other thing too, do you find it very common, or do you see it very often that people will use like SBA loans? Because I've seen that a lot, but I know like when it comes to SBA loans, it's a long process. Like it takes 6 months to get approved for an SBA loan. So if someone's starting that process now, or somebody wants to start, they're looking into getting into a franchise now, how long of a window would you say that you need, besides all the funding, SBA loan, whether, or friend fund, or whatever it is that they might be doing? What kind of window of time are they looking for from the time they decide, okay, this is the franchise that I've worked with Giuseppe, and this is the one that we came up with that would be the best fit for me?
Right.
From that decision to when you actually open up and start the business, what kind of timeline are you looking at?
Timeline, it could be, we've seen numbers between 2 and 3 months with people I've worked with. Could it be longer? Absolutely. And that variable is, first off, how big is the investment? But the biggest variable is if there's real estate involved, they want you to have that lease in place in order to get approved. So that's going to be the one when you're dealing with brick and mortar real estate locations. But if it's a service business, we've seen 2 months is, I'd say, maybe the average. We've seen it's come down. I'd say during COVID, that number was greater. I would say it was closer to 3. Part of it has to do with how quickly you're able to come up with the info. So to answer the question this way, prior to even looking at a franchise, get your financials in order, know where your accounts are, what your balances are. Big one, what your credit score is. I would encourage everyone to check their credit score today. If it's low, typically the SBA, I believe they want, I don't know the exact number. I think it's 680 to 700 in that range credit score. If you have, we had work with someone who needed credit repair. And I said, let's take care of that now. Go back, find a company that can help you. I guess they had a credit card stolen in the past, so they had to do a little bit of a credit repair. That's not an overnight fix. And that took several months to, I think it took them 90 days, if not more, to get fixed. So do that, do an analysis, get everything together, figure out, and then take it a step further to everyone listening. Even if you're not even certain about a franchise, this is good. Put together what you make, what you take home, not what your salary is, but what you're taking home, what's your monthly paycheck, and what are your expenses, and what are you left over with. You're gonna have to have money aside when you start any business, franchise or not. You want to have that buffer, that cushion, that financial cushion. And where can I cut back on expenses? Can I cut back a little bit? I personally did when I started my first business. We didn't go out to eat. We ate at home. I'm not telling everyone they have to do that, but that was a way for us to lower the monthly expense. So do a full analysis, see where you're at, and make the fixes now before starting that lending process.
Sure. Yeah. So that's great info. Right now, I want to ask you, for people that are listening right now that are like, okay, you know what? Maybe franchising is something I want to get into, right? I want to start my own business. But I was more interested in what Giuseppe said about being semi-passive or fully passive. So what does that kind of look like if somebody's doing this as a side hustle? I know you had mentioned that there are companies out there that will actually have that will actually run it essentially for you for a fee. but can you tell me the difference between how somebody would run a business as a semi-passive franchise owner versus being a fully passive franchise owner?
Yes. So with that semi-passive, very little time committed into the business. I don't want to say passive because there's always going to be time. So I use the term semi-passive, and really what that looks like is there's a fixed fee, and your involvement essentially in the business is 2, 3, 4 hours a week, whatever that franchise is requiring. Each brand is different. This is by the way, a brand new category. There's a handful of brands that we work with that fall into that category, and it's not that it's better than running it full-time or semi-absentee part-time. It's people who are coming back saying, I want an option outside of Wall Street. I have all my money invested in large cap, small cap, equities and things like that, but I want something out there that I can own. There's some tax benefit. I can have some say with what exactly the business does, which you don't have, obviously, when you're owning securities. So it was really built for that. So you pay the fee. There's minimal involvement. You can live anywhere in the country, which is really nice, and operate a franchise. If you're in New Jersey, I can operate it in California and vice versa. So it's really just minimal time. You're still involved in the business. You still own 100% of the business. It's just that your involvement is not, you don't physically have to be present. It's really a handful of Zoom calls a month. When you go, and by the way, it's a new category, and there's about a handful of options out there. With the semi-absentee, it's really putting in you have a full-time job or you're a full-time investor, and then this business is going to have a much greater time requirement. It's not going to be full-time where you have to leave your job, so it can easily be managed nights, weekends, maybe some hours during the week. And this is going to be more involvement where you hire a general manager. You're not hiring a management company through the franchisor, but that general manager is going to run the day-to-day. And in order to find this type of business, it's really figuring out which franchise companies will support me. And what does that look like? It may be turnkey marketing where they outsource and do the marketing for you at their location. And those leads go to a call center where they pick up the phone, answer questions. They could potentially upsell and book appointments for you. So again, each brand does it a little bit different, but this will allow you not to need an office because this is all outsourced for you for a fee at the home office, allowing you to free up and manage less people, run the business from home so that you can have, just say, a service-based business running from home where your staff is going directly to, just say, the homeowner, maybe doing a painting service, a roofing service, a dog waste removal service, and allowing you to have a very small number of employees and having that infrastructure and that support all taken care of for you. So definitely more involvement, but the trick to these businesses are finding the ones that have strong systems that will help you find and train the general manager. And then the other part on you is needing to empower the general manager to make certain decisions so you don't become a bottleneck in the business. That's the missing piece I see people making. They look at the franchise, and then when they hire the GM, they just say, you can only make these certain decisions. And that was the mistake I made. And going back, I said, I needed to empower that general manager day one, as opposed to down the road.
So they're not delegating enough authority right
Correct.
up front. Yeah.
You become a bottleneck.
I can understand though, at day one, like you got to build that trust and rapport first, at least in my opinion. I have a VA that works for me, and she is absolutely amazing, but it took some time before I was comfortable giving her certain accesses and certain things until like we built that relationship and built that rapport. And now she has access to all my stuff, right? I do my podcast and she takes it, and then my editing team will just do their thing. But that's one of those things that took time, and she grew with me. So I could totally understand somebody that is just getting into a franchise and they hire a GM and they're not comfortable giving them all that authority right up front. But at the same time, you hired them for that job, right? So you already vetted them through the interview process. So I feel like that's one of those spots where I'm torn, where I can see why you shouldn't bottleneck them from the start, but also I see why a lot of people would, because I've been there. And you even said it yourself too. Like when you started yours, you had the same experience and the same problem as you bottlenecked your GM right away. And I feel like that's one of those areas where I feel like a lot of people are going to have a difference of opinions when it comes to what they should do with their GM.
We'll get back to the show after a brief break. What's going on, everybody? So today I want to talk to you about Wealth Tender. If you are a finance content creator, whether that's a blog, a podcast, you're a financial advisor or a financial coach, I highly recommend you check out Wealth Tender. Wealth Tender is building a database of all the top finance blogs, podcasts, and the financial advisors and financial coaches that they have on there are vetted and top-notch. So we actually had the pleasure of hosting Brian Thorpe, the CEO and founder of Wealth Tender, on Average Joe Finance's podcast, episode 25. Go check out that episode, listen to his story, and listen to him talk about the database that he's building. It's really phenomenal stuff. So if you're interested in checking out the directory, or if you're a finance content creator and you're interested in joining up with the directory, go to the link below in the show notes, or check out www.averagejoefinances.com/wealthtender.
Looking to level up your podcast, social media, or both? Introducing Edit Pods, the ultimate podcast editing and social media management service. We offer top-notch audio and video editing, eye-catching artwork, engaging audiograms, and tailored social media posts. From captivating infographics to short video clips for Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube, we've got you covered. We'll manage your social media, posting weekly to keep your audience actively engaged. Elevate your podcast with Edit Pods. Visit editpods.com today.
Let's get back to today's episode.
I agree. And that's one of those things. It's almost like you have to list out. I completely agree, by the way. You have to list out the things you eventually want them doing and start hammering away. Okay.
Yeah.
They're allowed to, for example, we'll go minor stuff, allow a customer to get a credit. But if in the event it was something legal, just say something major, obviously you don't want them to be involved. So you slowly want to start delegating those tasks. So maybe, to your point, not day one, maybe it's every month, it's little by little. So it's not all or nothing. It's like, all right, these are the 20 tasks. Let's do a couple a month until we get to those 12 months. But yeah, certain decisions, those are always going to be delegated to the owner because they are high level. So yes, I absolutely agree.
All right. Awesome. Giuseppe, we've talked a lot about what somebody might be looking for when it comes to a franchise, right? But how does somebody know if they themselves are a good fit to be a franchisee?
How do they know they're a good fit? So you need to, number one, want the business built for you. A franchise is not for someone that wants to create every single thing from the service to every workflow to the types of vendors to, are we B2B? Are we going to be B2C? So really it's for someone that wants a system built for them. Number two, you need to be open to following processes and systems. The franchise companies, when they interview you, it's a two-way interview and they meet you. If you can't follow the basic process of a franchise, for example, stage one is fact finding through the franchisor. Stage two is validation and talking with employees. If day one, you just demand, franchisees, day one, if you just say, no, I don't want to talk to you, I just want to talk to the franchisees and I want to do everything in reverse order, I'd probably say you're not a good fit for a franchise, because that is literally what a franchise is. It's a system, it's a process. If you're going to, bad example, but I use it all the time. If you're buying a McDonald's and you want to introduce pizza to the menu, probably not a good fit for a franchise. Not to say there's not any autonomy. You definitely have say in the business and are okaying marketing and things like that. But the purpose is not to change the McDonald's menu per se, but it's really that process. How involved do you want to be? Who's the general manager you hire? That kind of thing. So you're definitely involved. You definitely have flexibility, but the process is big. The process, wanting the business built for you. Those are some major things to consider when looking at a franchise versus a startup or non-franchise business.
That's great considerations for anyone to have. And I just want to point something else out to you. I would totally try a McPizza.
Yes. Okay.
So that might not be a bad thing. I would totally go for it.
The $5 footlong was invented by franchisees at Subway. So I don't know if a lot of people know that, but so yes, they do take feedback. They do have conventions and all that, but the intention wasn't to start adding or changing the menu, but they do take feedback from the franchisees. So absolutely a great franchise company is going to listen to their franchisees for feedback.
Yeah. And I see a lot of Subways, actually probably most or all of them, also serve pizza now too.
Are they really? Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah,
All right,
yeah.
so they,
At least a lot of
interesting.
the ones I've been to, they have it as an option. They build it right there in front of you. You put all the toppings on,
Oh, well.
and anyway, I'm not gonna that we can go down a rabbit hole, especially because I know you're a pizza connoisseur just like me.
Yes.
That's totally another thing that's an East Coast thing because we know
Yes.
what good pizza tastes like. Sorry for everyone else out there, but it's true. Best pizzas on the East Coast, Northeast, right? So New York, New Jersey, yeah, I guess New England. Yeah,
Yeah,
they'll argue that they
they
have the best pizza, but
the New Haven style. Yep.
yeah,
So
actually Haven style pizza. It's really good.
I like them all. So I leave it at that. I don't like to start arguments as that. We like them all. Which I like better, it's a different story, but I do eat them all. So
Yeah.
as you could tell, got to lose some weight.
Yeah, me too, man. Okay. We're not going to go down that rabbit hole because we could probably talk about pizza all day. I know I could. But speaking of, I think I'm going to have some pizza for lunch today. That sounds really great. Anywho, so Giuseppe, I'd like to transition this into something that I call the final round. It's where I'm going to ask you the same 4 questions I ask everybody that comes on the show, and it gives us a better idea of how you are under a little bit of pressure, which I'm sure you're going to crush it. So if you're ready to go, we'll get this started.
All right, let's go for it.
All right, Giuseppe, the first question of the final round is, what's the biggest mistake you've ever made when it comes to your finances, investing, real estate, or just business in general?
I would say coming from the investment world is thinking I was properly diversified. They say don't put your eggs in all in one basket, investing in the stock market, mutual funds and stocks. And as I was opened up to assets, liabilities, and true diversification, talked about cash flow, really opened up my eyes to owning my own business. And that's where I've created most of my wealth, is owning businesses. Not to say I don't invest in the stock market, which I absolutely do, but opening my eyes to real diversification. There's nothing wrong with owning real estate, investing in the stock market, and owning some businesses. I know we in the financial world, we fall in the asset boxes, large cap, mid cap, and growth and value and all that fun stuff, but nothing wrong with it. But don't put that all in the market. Invest in yourself, own a business, own some real estate. That way, if one area takes a hit, you have a few other areas to take care of you.
Yeah, no, I love that. I mean, personally, that's what I do too. I invest in the stock market. I have real estate and I have a business. So it's actually I have 2 businesses, but those are the kind of things that's real diversification. It's not just going to the stock market and getting into a whole bunch of different funds or ETFs or individual stocks. It's not true diversification is being in different investment in general, different investments in general. So I definitely appreciate that answer. Okay. Giuseppe, the next question, you're going to see these kind of tie into each other, is what is something that you've learned that you wish you knew when you first got started? And we'll say in the franchising industry.
So I think my biggest weakness was I would ask too many people for their opinion and recommendations when I truly felt strongly about something. And that's with running my business, when to hire a general manager, when to become a franchise coach and consultant. And people were very open, but I tended to ask too many people to the point where it actually offered more confusion than anything else. So I would say, and because I was opening up to whoever was open to having a conversation. So I think what I've learned, I wish I knew, is trust your gut, ask for advice for people that have been there. Don't ask someone that's never owned the business advice. They don't mean anything harmful by the advice they give, but they've never gone through it. They've never invested their life savings and not been able to get paid for several months like I did in my first business. So I think watch you ask advice for and always follow your gut. Don't have people talk you into things. There's some things I wish I had started sooner, but because I took other people's advice. And that's on me because I was open to asking. So trust your gut and move forward and don't look back.
Yeah, Giuseppe, I appreciate that answer because maybe it's a East Coast Italian thing, but we're so open with people. And sometimes it could be to our own detriment where you bring too many people in and you get all this conflicting advice. And now you're stuck in a worse position than you were before you started asking those questions.
Agreed.
They do it there too.
And so they do it. They don't mean
spiritually.
They don't mean anything by it. Sometimes it's to protect you. Sometimes they've never done it before. So just be careful who you watch, who you ask advice from.
Yeah,
basically.
No, that's important. Make sure the person that you're asking advice from has had some skin in the game in that particular thing that you're asking them for. Okay,
100%.
Awesome. Giuseppe, the third question of the final round is, Do you have any tips or tricks that you would recommend to someone that is just getting started out today? And we'll say somebody that's starting out in the franchise industry.
Yeah. So this is someone that's, I guess, maybe starting their search. And I would say get clear on what you want. It's as basic as it comes. And people are like, all right, what else is there? There's really figure out what, not today, but in the next 5 years, the next 10 years, where are you living? What kind of money are you making? Envision exactly where you're living, what are you doing daily, the hours you're working. I know I've manifested that over you just by thinking and writing it down and looking at it. I'm not saying you stare at it and it's going to happen, but by looking at it, you start to get inspired. I have my goals. I have a Google document or Google Sheets, I should say, and I look at that every day. And it's just there's different goals that I have that I want to attain, and I break them up into habits. So get very clear on what life looks like, what you enjoy doing, not the how, right? Not how you're going to get there. That's where people get tripped up and end up not doing anything, but write it down and then figuring afterward, not how to do it. And this is something I learned from Dan Sullivan, Who Not How is the book, is figuring out who can help me get there. The who is 10 times, in many cases, 10 times more important than the how, because the who is the person that's done it before, and they're going to help you expedite and say, you know what, to get to this income level, these are the things you have to do, not having to figure it out on your own. But the mentors, the people that we discuss and work with, they're able to help you get there faster. And then they're able to open up their networks, just like the network I have with you as well. So I think the who, not how is big, and just getting clear on that. And once you have that all figured out, work with someone. Doesn't have to be me, but if you want to work with someone like myself, I can show you what that franchise may look like and how it will affect you. That who can help you figure out what should estate planning, anything you have a goal of working out, losing weight, you hire a coach, right? You could do the research. Odds are you're not going to do it. The coach is going to really motivate you and get you going. So I think having a good network of people is going to definitely save you a lot of time and a lot of money.
100% agree. I absolutely love that, because I talk about who, not how all the time when it comes to whatever you're doing in life. Like even down to my own podcast, when it came to like when I decided to outsource certain things, I knew that the editing was taking up too much time for me. Yeah. And I had to find the right person or right team to edit my podcast. And that was part of that who, not how. So I absolutely love that. I feel like a lot more people should take a second look at their business or businesses and see if they have the right people in the right spot, right? Making sure that the tasks that they not necessarily don't want to do, but something that maybe you're not as good at, that somebody else is better at, let them do it. Absolutely. And take that off your plate and do the things that you're good at. And even sometimes the things that you're good at, if it takes up too much of your time, find someone else that can do it just as good and outsource that as well. I love outsourcing. I do it all the time. So that's why I love that answer. Okay. You named a very good book there, but I'm also going to ask you this final question in the final round, and it's besides your own. Do you have a favorite business, investing, or real estate related book or podcast or both? And give me something different than Who, Not How.
There was an investment book, and I just, for the life of me, cannot remember the name, so I have to pass on the investment book. But from a business standpoint, I think the book, which I think I read maybe about a couple of years ago, is called Traction by Gino Wickman.
Oh, yeah.
And it's a great book. They teach the entrepreneurial operating system, and this has been extremely powerful in the franchise community. I'm working with someone, believe it or not, who's a surgeon, and he found that book and he implemented that in his practice. And really what it comes down to are systems in place, but balancing. If you look at the spokes of a wheel and having all areas balanced, like your employees, your marketing, business strategy, you go down the list and making sure that you are constantly monitoring them, but not just, I'll check on it, but daily activities, KPIs put in place so that you're making sure everything is flowing. Because what good is this business when you have 6 spokes of a wheel, all 5 are doing really well, but you're losing employees, morale is down. That's the lifeblood of many businesses, is the staff. So making sure you find the right employees, that they're treated fairly, that they're motivated, they're compensated fairly. And so that book has helped both franchise and non-franchise businesses. And I would encourage everyone to check it out. Check out the Entrepreneurial Operating System. They have some great programs in place to really help just about any business. So a really good read overall.
Yeah, absolutely love that. It is a great follow-up to Who Not How, especially when it comes to building your business the right way. Those two books are going to help you really take it to the next level. So
Yeah.
great recommendation. I've read Traction. Amazing book. Amazing. Okay. So Giuseppe, that is it for the final round. Now, I do have one more question I want to ask you, and this is the most important question I'm going to ask you for this entire podcast, because the people that were listening, you might have someone here listening that's saying, hey, you know what? I think I do want to start a franchise and I want to learn more. And I want to learn more about Giuseppe or his services and how he can help me. Speaking of that, where can people find more information about you? Do you have a website, any social media profiles people can follow? And then also tell us about your book and where we can get your book.
Awesome. I appreciate that. Yeah, go right to the website. It's GG, my initials, the franchise guide, GUIDE. So ggthefranchiseguide.com. And you will have right on there, you can book a call directly with me. It's on the upper right-hand corner. You can click on the workshop, which is a video workshop of employee versus employer and the risks associated with being an employee and the risks with being an employer. People don't really realize the difference between the two. And so you can definitely check it out. We also have a podcast on there as well. There's 150 plus shows covering just about every topic on business ownership. Booking a call, we set up a 20-minute call with anyone that has. So anyone listening in, if you just have general questions on franchising, you don't have any savings, but you want to know where to start, feel free to book a call. Our services are always 100% free. There's no contracts with our agreements. We are paid directly from the franchise companies, like a real estate agent or an executive recruiter. So there's no risk aside from 20 minutes. And my guarantee to you is within 20 minutes, we can figure out together if there's a potential for a franchise being a good fit. Simple as that. Our next call, we dive into more of the specifics. The book, Franchise Freedom, which is also the name of the podcast, is my exact blueprint of how I found my first two franchises back in 2007. It's my gift to anyone listening in. You can download it. It's 48 pages. It's a 30-minute read. It's the exact blueprint I used. It goes into specifics like the who, not how, and building teams and things like that. And then I offer my service over and beyond. So if you're not ready for a chat, check out the book, but would love to speak with you. And again, even if it's a basic question, you need clarity, your time frames in 2 years, feel free to give me a call. I'll be more than happy to help out where I can.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I'm going to make sure I have all the links in the show notes for our listeners to go and follow. They can copy and paste or click away. The only thing I ask is that you please don't do it while you're driving, but definitely go check out Giuseppe's book, check out his podcast, go check out his website. And if franchising is something you're interested in, set up a 20-minute call with him. Hey, Giuseppe, this was fantastic. And to close things out, do you have any final thoughts for our listeners?
Final thoughts. Don't give up. Bet on yourself. Don't get overwhelmed with the level of information out there with the internet. Figure out, get really clear on where you want to be. Bet on yourself. You don't have to have tons of money to open up a business. You don't need tons of education. Really figure out, as I mentioned before, and I repeat myself, is where you want to be, and then go full force. Educate, talk to great people, and move forward. It's a lot going on, lots of distractions. We're at the point where there's just way too much information. What the heck do I do with it? Focus in, talk to a few people. And if you're currently not happy at your job and you want change, isn't going to happen automatically. You're going to have to get out of your comfort zone and really just take charge of your future and career. Think of how unhappy you'll be if you stay in that current situation. So I say go for it. We only live once, and why not bet on yourself? So that's my advice.
Yeah, I absolutely love that. Bet on yourself. Fantastic. Giuseppe, again, thank you so much for taking the time today to join me on the podcast and give my listeners so much great advice and golden nuggets. There's a lot of great things to take away from this episode. So on behalf of all my listeners, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mike. It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And hey, I also want to thank all of my listeners for joining me and our special guest, Giuseppe Grammatico, on the Average Joe Finances podcast. Go leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you liked about today's episode with Giuseppe. Aloha from Hawaii and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you for making it to the end of this episode. Greatly appreciate you being here with me today on the Average Joe Finances podcast. If you haven't done so yet, make this the episode that you go leave us a 5-star rating or subscribe to our YouTube channel. The Average Joe Finances podcast is for informational and entertainment purposes only. Have an outstanding day.
Thanks for listening to the Average Joe Finances Podcast, your source for beating debt, saving money, and investing. Learn more at averagejoefinances.com.